All right, here we are at Pennypack Trust in Montgomery County. Yes, we've gone more than 10 miles away from Washington's Crossing for the first time. Now, it's about 5:30 already, so I want to get out there and walk. So we're going to cut this intro short, and let's get walking. Now, this park is quite a bit different than the others. It's a relatively new park, from what I understand. And a lot of the areas in this park are just now being rewilded. Kind of unusually for parks in the area, you can't actually bring your dog here. Most parks you can, and you see it all the time. But the reason you can't here is for a very specific reason. They're trying to make this a natural habitat for foxes and, weasels and all sorts of animals like that. And your dog's urine actually disrupts that. It makes them feel like it's not their territory, and it scares them away. So you're actually not allowed to bring your dogs here, and it makes sense. And as much as I love dogs, there's tons of parks where you can bring your dog, so it's not really that big of a deal. Now, this is actually the smallest of the parks that we've come to so far. It's only about 2 miles from end to end, but thankfully there's a good number of paths that crisscross the park, so you can still have a good long walk here if you just sort of zigzag around. And just aesthetically, this is a bit different than some of the other parks we went to. It's interesting, all around here is actually some pretty dense suburban development, but you would never know it just by looking around. I mean, this area, we are only a couple miles north of the Philadelphia city limits. And this was the original countryside outside the city. And I think that's a lot of the reason that it was maintained in this way. Sometimes horses come over here, but I don't think they're out right now. So yeah, I think that a lot of the rich people of earlier eras set up right outside here because we're close to the city but still in the country. And when suburban development came out to the suburbs, they sort of skipped over this area because of the wealth here. I mean, think about places that are very highly developed. If you're from the Philly area, you've probably heard of Lansdale, North Wales, Horsham, Hatboro, Montgomeryville. All those places are significantly further out than where we are here. But this is the area that actually resembles much more what this place used to be, just because it was already, well, in a way you could say it was already developed, but it was developed as a rich country estate kind of place. And so, therefore, it avoided the subdivisions and the McMansions and all that. And they just built all that further out. But yeah, I've been to many parks in the Philadelphia region. Very few of them look like this. There is a very unique kind of aesthetic to this. And I think a lot of it does come down to the fact that they're rewilding a lot here. But once again, I really do appreciate them doing that, because now all those suburban people who have to live in those McMansions and, older suburban houses, they have somewhere nice and rustic to come and walk in. And one thing I love about this is that the density of paths is very high. A lot of parks we went to, there's only like 3 or 4 junctions where you can go on different paths. But every half mile, if not more frequently, there's a different option that you can take here. You can walk across fields like this. You can walk across more wooded areas. There's a pond that we'll probably see later. Just very relaxing. And to prove how relaxing it is, I'll shut up for a little bit. Sometimes when you see these trails, you have to look down them because you'll see signs like that that says wildlife only beyond this point. Because there are some trails that they're still rehabilitating here. So, like I said, all the options. You saw there was a 4-way junction over there, and then there's another split over here. So, the combination of paths to walk on here is very high. This might not be the place to go in midday in the middle of summer just because the sun is bearing down on you. But seeing that it's almost 6 o'clock in the evening, I'm not too bothered. And here's another example of a split. Yet another split right here. We're going to try going this way. Scenery like this actually is another thing that triggers the ancestral nostalgia, just like the canal does. Just something feels ancient about all this. Like this feels like it's pretty close to something you would see in parts of England or Scotland. And it's maybe why the settlers who came here felt more at home in this area than any of the other places that they colonized. At least I think they did. Yeah, I bet a lot of the English and the Scottish and the Germans felt very at home here. Although it isn't 1-to-1. For one thing, all those places have the moderating influence of the Atlantic Current and the North Sea. So their weather doesn't get to the highs or lows as ours. Widely speaking, of course, there are regional variations and such, but in general, we get both hotter summers and colder winters than you'll see in the British Isles. Like, I remember when I was first learning about this, it surprised me that the average summer high in southern England is only like in the 70s, like around 75. And by the time you get up to northern England or Scotland, the average high is only like 68 degrees, which is wild to me. Right now, it's about 86 degrees. And that is an utterly normal high temperature for this area in the summer. it routinely goes over 90. And another thing they don't tell you is it's very humid here. I would say that today is a day of moderate humidity by the standards of this area. And still, it's probably, if you have never been here and you grew up somewhere a lot drier, you'd probably find it hard to breathe, just because you still feel it pretty thick. And you can tell looking around, it does have that sort of balmy look about things. I don't know how well that comes across on the camera, but if you're there in person, you can see what I mean. But when you've lived here your entire life, you're just kind of used to it. Like, I just fully expect there to be about a 1 to 2 month stretch of every summer that is just intolerably hot and humid. There's usually a stretch, usually covering the month of July, sometimes covering the end of June, beginning of August, where it is just too hot and humid to walk on 90% of the days. So that's when I have to improvise and do sun-up walks. Like, you remember, we went to the canal in Yardley. One of my favorite things to do there, if it's going to be like 95 degrees, which it was several times, then ideally I'd like to leave the house around 4:30, 4:45, get up to Yardley just as the first rays of sun were coming up. Like, not even the first rays of sun, the pre-dawn glow. Because you actually need a surprisingly small amount of light to see by. At least if you have relatively healthy eyes. So I'd start my walk usually a little after 5, and I'd do the 8 or 9 miles of the canal, and I'd finish up by 8. Maybe 8:30, 9 if I had a little bit of a later start time. And then it really wouldn't start getting intolerably hot until around 10. So it would work out. Do you see those little towers in the distance? That is part of Bryn Athyn College. Very cute. And when it comes to winters, I don't want to act like they don't get snow in England or in Germany or whatever, because obviously they do, and it does get cold there. And even in North America terms, our winters are very mild when you consider upstate New York, Vermont, Michigan, or Minnesota, somewhere like that. But still, it's no joke. It gets down pretty cold. It routinely falls down in the teens and even single digits at night during the depth of winter. Then at other times it actually does warm up and you get highs in the 40s and 50s, and it becomes gray and rainy. And then it will switch and become very cold. You'll have daily highs that are either right around freezing or below it, and you'll have very sunny skies, but a cold kind of sun. You probably know what I mean. The icy blue blank skies in the depths of winter when it's cold, when it's really cold. I kind of dig it though. I love all the seasons. That is the thing about this area. If you're a 4-season enjoyer, this is a great spot for you. The only downside to the weather here is that the middle bits, the really mild parts of spring and fall, never seem to last long enough. The hot, sweaty weather goes pretty much till the end of September, even into October a little bit. Then you'll have a couple months of that perfect, crisp fall weather, and then by the end of the month, you're plunging into chilly territory. Same thing with spring. Winter tends to linger around in some form well into April. You'll get some warmth. It'll be really nice in May. May is honestly probably the nicest month here, apart from October. But by the end of May, you're probably already getting some hot, steamy days. And then late May, early June is kind of more tolerable weather, but it's getting hot. And then by the end of June, you're just in the heat. Can't believe I just bored you with weather talk for all these minutes. And as you can see, we're on a track, and we are actually getting to the other end of the park already. Yeah, it feels like we weren't walking for very long, but that's because I've basically been tracing the outside edge of the park. And now we can head back, but we don't have to head directly back. We can do a bit of a zigzag, and the amount of zigging and zagging we do will determine the amount of time we spend here, which is very nice because you can really have a walk of any length here. You can have a really short one, really long one, just depends on how much you want to do that. Now, if memory serves me correctly, this is Edge Hill Road, or at least it connects to Edge Hill Road down there. It does actually have a certain degree of traffic, but you really don't have to worry about that because you can just simply walk on this path. And also, where I am is actually extremely easy to avoid. You just literally make a right turn at any of the 10 or so junctions you walked right by. So walking right here is by no means a necessary part of the trip. And over here you have a sign. And yeah, that is a big part of why this has remained the way it is. You know that Montgomery County, where we are now, this one suburban county has 850,000 people, which is crazy because it's not even that big. It's only an average sized county by Pennsylvania standards. And yet, the suburbanization here has taken hold far more than anywhere else in the Philly area, even Bucks County, which is pretty suburbanized itself. But it's just weird how so many people could be packed into an area, and it just, the weird aesthetics of American suburbia, that they still keep up the sort of the rural lie that the area's rural. I mean, how can you have a crowded county of nearly 1 million people and still say that it's rural? I mean, parts of it are up in the northern parts, but even that, you know, it's pretty crowded. And just the way that cities and towns are built these days, even though Philly has significantly better than average transit by American standards, it's still extremely car-centric out here in the suburbs. And if you think that 800,000 people trying to cram onto roads that were built for rural traffic is a problem, you would be correct. The traffic here is atrocious. Montgomery probably being the worst offender of all the counties, except of course for Philadelphia itself. And that's just because even though there are several train lines and plenty of bus lines, it's just the way that things were built. You have all sorts of these suburban cul-de-sacs, things like the most stereotypical kind of looking places. And it's just, it didn't have to be that way. And fixing that is going to be generations worth of work. And sometimes I'm not even sure how you would do it. You know, you've kept up this premise of, oh, we're just putting a few houses out here in the country, and you build a dozen units there, 50 units there, 200 units there, and before you know it, it's like, whoops, we have 1 million people in this area that at one point had well under 100,000, probably less than a century ago. So, I don't know, it's just the way that we think in this country. We don't think systemically, we don't think in systems. It's the American curse. We just really think in very individualistic ways. We think about just small little pieces of things, and we never think about the whole picture. Significant problem. Now, as you might have noticed, we walked through the other entrance, and there are a bunch of other little things here. Like, I'm pretty sure these are plants that you can buy when the store is open. And that's like the one thing about this area, or about this place, is that there are only 2 parking lots, one at each end, and they're both rather small. So it's kind of good that it's not so well known, because if it was, there would be a significant problem with people trying to all cram in here. But I think we are actually close enough that you might be able to find on-street parking in nearby suburban developments. Now, I have not tested that personally. I don't know. Don't take my word for it. But I feel like it's plausible. You can see that they're doing some work here. They're putting in a brand new path. I really like how you get a lot of different looking areas close together in this park. A lot of these areas don't look like they exist in the same park, and yet they do. And I think that sort of aesthetic variety is very nice. I don't think I want to go on my rant about individualism today, because that is a hell of a rant. Talking about individualism and how much it sucks and how terrible it is. But one of these days, you'll have to remind me. I will have to go on that rant, because it's a good one. A lot of these trails are named. Not all of them, but some of them. Instead of ranting about individualism today, maybe I can just wheel it back into planning, because that is sort of a pet passion of mine, and has been actually for a very long time. You know, throughout all my political evolution as a young person, I have always been interested in planning and how cities and towns are designed. And a lot of it comes from the sense of where I grew up. I felt trapped in my own house, basically. Because if you live in an area where you need a car to get anywhere, you are just completely dependent on your parents for everything in your life. I think it should be the right of any child in a developed country to be able to just safely go, leave the house, walk to the corner store, you know, buy a snack, whatever he wants, go out, meet his friends, play outside. You know, he should be able to do this at the age of like 8 or 9 at the oldest, if not even younger, and should be completely safe. Not worried about weirdos, not worried about kidnappers, not worried about getting run over by a truck or a car because of bad urban design. I think that is a fundamental human right, and I think that we need to develop both of our physical infrastructure and our social infrastructure in order to make that happen. And we just don't think in those ways in either sense in America. We don't think about the social situation at all, unless you're a lefty who is thinking about how to make it worse. And the physical infrastructure is a complete afterthought. Everything's piecemeal, and they only worry about things when they become problems, and sometimes not even then. They'll just slap a band-aid on it and be like, yeah, it's fine. But Yeah, you gotta see how dangerous some of these roads are around here. You'll have this road that has not significantly changed since the days of when this was a truly rural area. You'll have one lane aside and you will have no shoulders. So if you're a person trying to ride your bike or on foot, you have to be exceptionally brave, and not just brave, but even a little foolish. And this is all the kind of person that I was. You know, I was always the kind of guy who was like, I'm not afraid of this. I'm going to bike on this death road. And I did that so many times when I was in my teens and 20s. But it's just not safe, and it's not good, and it's not thought through. Like, I grew up in a township in Pennsylvania that's a smallish township, and it has 20,000 people, which might not seem like a huge number, but when you're thinking of the context of just a single town, it's quite large. And yet, there was no way to get from my parents' suburban development to the core downtown of our little town, which is actually quite nice. I'll take you there one of these days. But you can't get there without walking 2 miles on some very dangerous and narrow roads. If you go one way, there is a narrow stone bridge that crosses over a small creek at the bottom of a hill, and gravel trucks go down this road, barreling down, going 50 or 60 miles an hour. And it's also one of the main commuting routes between Newtown and Doylestown. So there's plenty of cars, plenty of dump trucks. It's just, and there's no room to walk. What you have to do, you stand at one end, you wait until things calm down, and then you just run for your life to the other side of that bridge. And that's what you have to do if you are a kid who grew up where I did. That's the only way that you can get somewhere, is you have to, take your life in your hand against dump trucks. I mean, that's a human rights violation, in my opinion. That is a human rights violation. And now we're back out here into a somewhat more open area. Whenever I see foliage like this, that's clearly growing but not huge, it makes me wonder how long it's been like this. I feel that as recently as 2 or 3 years ago, this could have been a cultivated field. But it's going to be turning back into natural stuff in time. At least that's the hope. And now we're abutting onto some private land. And I've always really liked this mansion. In the world of really ugly modern mansions, you gotta appreciate an old classic one like this. There's like a pool house over there too. You don't get the best view from over here, and honestly you can't really get that close to it, but we might be able to get a better view of that mansion because it's really neat. I like this because it's one of the few paths here that is only quasi-official. Like, I'm not even sure if this is maintained at all. It just runs along this fence. But I like the contrast between the wide sweeping fences that we saw before and a nice little trail like this. Unfortunately, I really can't get too deep into talking about planning either, because there is something at the core of American urban planning that I don't even want to talk about here on YouTube on this super obscure channel. But it has to do with race and with race relations. You are never going to get urbanism, real urbanism in America without fixing race relations. And you're never going to unless you change the paradigm about how we think about race. And that's never going to happen under the system. So, all these lefty channels who are talking about urbanism in America, they're fundamentally doomed to fail their worldview, their philosophy is doomed to fail because of their view of race and race relations. So unless there is a major shift on that, you're not going to want to get people to live in more walkable areas. People feel they have to flee, and they have to live in these very inconvenient, very inhospitable areas because they are rightfully afraid of what the cities have become. And there are solutions to this, but none of them are permissible to talk about on YouTube for risk of running afoul of so-called hate speech policies, which is one of these, hate has become a very Orwellian word in the modern discourse, because hate is an emotion. Hate is something that you feel. Hate isn't a policy. It's not a philosophy. It's not part of something like that. Basically, if ever you hear someone say that's hate speech or that's hate, all that means is it's politics that I don't like. Just in the way that the word fascist has come to represent any vaguely right-wing politics that someone doesn't like, even if it has absolutely nothing to do with actual fascism, which it almost never does. But I'm dancing right up to the line on this, so I've got to pull it back. Just to say that people have a misconception that Americans don't want urbanism. They don't want to live in nicer neighborhoods and more convenient neighborhoods, and I think that's false. What people want is to be safe, and they're willing to live in less convenient, less walkable, sadder, crappier, more alienating neighborhoods if it means that they're safe. So, you fix safety. You fix the safety, and you'll be surprised how willing people are to accept a much more urbanist design philosophy when it comes to towns and cities. Because believe it or not, even when I talked about how I still think that farmers are the soul of a nation, I still am an urbanist at core. Most people live in cities, and that's just the way that human history is most likely going to progress from this point forward for the foreseeable future. And I think there's no reason why cities have to be terrible, disgusting, alienating places. They weren't always, and they don't have to be. And there are ways that we can fix those things. And I think that's what we need to talk about rather than just running further and further away. I mean, America's a big country, but at some point, there's nowhere left to run to. And many of us are already getting to that point all over the place. And now we are heading up to Pennypack Creek, which is where this whole area gets its name from. Pennypack Reserve, Pennypack Creek. And over there, you will see the Pennypack Trail, which is actually not part of this park, but is actually a rail trail. It used to be part of the Newtown line. Back in the day, SEPTA had a line that went all the way up to Newtown, but it hasn't run since 1983. So, needless to say, I never was on it. And most of it has been converted to a rail trail or left just sitting. Now, this bridge indicates that this area was actually a road at one point, like an actual road that people drove on, but obviously hasn't been for a while. Now, this is Pennypack Creek. It's a lovely little creek. Flows from here into the city. And over here is the Pennypack Trail. Now, unlike the park, you can totally bike here. You can totally bring your dogs. It's completely for everyone. But yeah, here is a sign welcoming you to the reserve. And we're just going to turn around and head back into the park, We could walk along the trail, but we just have to walk ourselves back, and we don't have that much time before the park closes. Look how pretty this is. I wonder if I can get away with if I wanted to bring out the flip, I could probably actually balance that thing on its side, but I had to keep my finger on top of the phone so it didn't fall over, so I'm pretty sure that wasn't as smooth as I would have liked. I do regret how choppy and bouncy these videos are, and I don't blame anyone for not wanting to actually watch them. But anyway, if you're still here, cool. And you can see the road pretty abruptly ends here, so whatever road might have existed here has long since been torn up, apart from this single lane kind of thing here. And obviously this has not been paved probably since the 1960s, if not earlier, and it probably won't be paved. And if anything, if they ever do need to do work on this, they'll just tear it all up and lay down gravel, because it's never going to need to be a road again. So you can tell that this here, these used to be country lanes where there used to be cars and things. Like, this used to be farming territory, I'm pretty sure. Because yeah, these all look like former little one-lane roads. And remember, I mentioned a pond earlier. You can't see it yet, but the pond is over here. When we get to where these benches are, then we'll be able to see it. See that? Absolutely beautiful, isn't it? You know, when they develop a new area, historically, they've always drained massive amount of wetlands, and that's always created massive ecological disruptions. Of course, there are plenty of things in swamps that are not good for, you know, human health. So I can see sort of the point of doing it, but I really believe you have to keep all things in perspective. We are stewards of this earth, and we have to respect and protect the environment while also taking care of our own needs. And I think that's why it's a good idea to have places like this, to have these preserves and these natural areas set aside where there's actual deliberate attention put into reconstructing some of these habitats that have been destroyed throughout the years, and all the efforts to preserve and protect endangered species. I think that's really important. I think we have a responsibility as sort of the big brothers of this planet to look after these animals. We weren't put here to exploit. We were put here to survive just like anyone else. And we have been given, or have evolved, or both, extraordinary intelligence. And with that intelligence comes the increased responsibility of understanding what we're doing, understanding our impact on the world, and being able to use our minds, to use our ability to plan and to think, to actually protect the life. I mean, think about something like a fox, or a toad, or an eagle or something, they have no concept of extinction or habitat loss or invasive species or anything like that. Those concepts cannot be understood outside of humans. So all these animals are just following their natures, doing what they do, and we're the only ones who have the ability to see the big picture. And that is what gives us that responsibility. And I do understand, being as smart as we are and as powerful as we are, that does afford us certain rights over the planet, a certain lordship, you could say. But I believe that we have to self-enforce controls over our worst and most destructive qualities. So this is one of the many reasons that I do not support capitalism, because capitalism is just, at its core, it believes in growth by all means, economic growth by all means, and that means consuming everything. Everything will be thrown into the fire. People, nature, nothing is sacred, nothing matters except the bottom line, and everything will be sacrificed. And in the end, capitalism, when there's nothing left to consume, it will consume itself. And you already see signs of that. It might surprise you that I am a right-wing anti-capitalist, because if you live in the narrow worldview of the American two-party system, that doesn't make any sense. But no, it's real and it exists, and I am one. I am a right-wing anti-capitalist. Just like I am a right-wing urbanist, and that's something else that seems to be a contradiction in American terms. And yes, those two things are philosophically linked. But remember what I said in the very first episode. I believe in harmony. I believe in harmony between man and nature, between man and man, rich and poor, man and woman, between the different races. I believe in finding and protecting that harmony, and that is at the core of my philosophical beliefs. We have a little wooden archway out here. It's pretty random. But yeah, we are actually walking on a trail that's parallel to the trail that we were just on like 5 minutes ago. And that's another thing I love about this park, is you just got all these random things all over that existed for different purposes. Like back there, that was a road at one point. This was probably a trailer track at one point. And now you can just, it's all for walking. You just walk around. Like, what did this used to be? I don't know. There's a million little stories hidden here, just like everywhere else. It'll be fun to come to places like this in the fall. That's another thing about doing these vlogs. I can do them all again, go to all the places again in the fall, and they're going to be completely different places. Just because everything just changes so much with the seasons. Things look completely different. And you know what else? Once winter comes and the snow falls, I can do it all for a third time, and it will be different yet again. Same for the spring. You get 4 places in one around here. That is the beauty of the 4 seasons. You can see some of the same stuff we saw at Bald Plate, where they're trying to regrow some trees here. They had to chop something down at some point. There were big stacks of wood here at some point, piled up like Lincoln logs. But whatever purpose those served is clearly done with, because they're all gone, either burned or transported away, because they're not here anymore. This is actually a sign I don't remember seeing last time I was here. Guess people must have been collecting mushrooms or something. But Can't do that. They're trying to let this area grow back to its natural state, and if people are doing stuff like that, it's going to hamper that effort. And we're back here along the Pennypack Creek. And this might look like we're on some sort of, elite paved trail or something, but this will descend into gravel again very soon. Yeah, they get pretty specific about what you can and can't do around here. A lot of these waterways, they actually stock them with fish that people can come and fish. And trout, I know they stock it with trout. I'm not really a fish expert, so I'm not sure what else they do. But they do that in the Delaware Canal too, just not this year, obviously, because there's no water in it. Fish would suffocate. And yeah, you can see the condition of the path is getting more patchy. But this actually goes up the hill in the distance, as you can see. And eventually, this does go back to where we parked. And then it becomes an actual road once again, albeit a very small local road. But pretty much the only remaining trace of when this whole thing was a rural, little, tiny country one-lane road. And now we'll veer off this main path and go back up the hill, loop around that way. As you can see, the sun is starting to get low in the horizon, although sunset is still a good ways off, probably half an hour to 45 minutes from now. So we still have a significant amount of time to weave our way back there. And this is what I said about the variety of paths in this park. This is fully the same kind of path you'd expect to see somewhere like Bald Plain Mountain. And it's mixed in with these former tractor trails and former country lanes. And here we are on the same path we started, going back towards the car. To me, this path is the icon of the whole park. I just love how it curves here. Yes, brothers, do not lust over the curve of a woman who's not your wife. Lust over the curves of the land. And even though it's against the rules, and I would never advocate for this, this does look like a sick spot to ride your mountain bike. Just going whoosh down the hill around the corner. Especially if you had good shocks on that bad boy. Be a fun ride. The sun is almost down. It's just behind that tree. I love these fields in the sunset, don't you? And here we are at the end of the park. Now, today was the shortest walk so far. I think it was less than 2 hours, but you don't need a long one every time. Shows you where we are, what part of the park. And now we return. As I mentioned before, this is that same path that was once a road, but the actual road that's accessible to cars ends here. But the original road carries on, goes back out to the main road, and that's going to be it. Alright, now we're back in the car and ready to head out. That was a lovely little walk. I enjoyed that very much. This park was a recent discovery of mine, but I really enjoy myself every time I come here. So, I want to say thank you everybody for watching, and we'll be doing some more walks very soon. Goodbye.